There's a lot of misconception around the industry and a lot of investors that don't really have too much extensive knowledge about how to fill out a real estate contract, what a standard purchase and sale agreement looks like, the type of language it should include, and how to facilitate this in the presence of a seller. So in this video, we're going to dive in with how to fill out a wholesale real estate contract and to present it in a way that makes sense to all parties. Let's go. Okay, so we are going to check out the screen where we can go over a standard contract for the purchase of real estate. Now, the way that this specific contract is structured, it really does position it almost more like an option agreement, which essentially gives you as the buyer the option to purchase this piece of real estate. The reason that we use this internally is because it is an efficient process and it gives us the ability to have flexibility as far as the terms of the agreement. So let's go ahead and start with a standard purchase agreement for the purchase of the property. Now, whenever purchasing a piece of real estate, you're going to fill out what is called a standard purchase and sale agreement. Now, obviously, every state has their own standard LLR contracts that the real estate agents use. We prefer to use the one in-house that just gives us a little bit more flexibility. Now, if we're looking over here at the contract on the screen, you can see here it says, in the consideration of the mutual promises and consideration contained herein, which basically, hey, the parties that are sitting here agreeing to this certain terms of the purchase of this real property agree to the following terms inside of the contract, right? Number one, parties, the buyer, that would be you. You're purchasing the real estate directly from the seller. Buyer, your company, LLC, or buyer's heirs and assigns. Now, we usually just leave this part blank. If you wanted to put your mailing address, you can do so. The next line, and sellers, is where we would put the seller's name, right? So the seller's name, if it's a husband and wife, we include both names here. If the seller is a company, of course, we include the LLC. And seller's heirs and assigns, this means that, hey, basically, if the sellers were to pass or anything else that falls, their heirs would assume the terms inside of this agreement. So the terms here, the parties are agreeing to the following: legal description, parcel number you can find inside of the deed book, or even on PropStream, you'll see the APN for the parcel ID. If you do want to skip this part and you don't happen to have the public record search in front of you, you can simply put as stated in deed book, right? It's in a certain county. That parcel ID is located in the Register of Deeds. And of course, in this county, so if we're doing business in Richland County, Columbia, South Carolina, that would follow right here. South Carolina, right? This area is for the state. Commonly known as, you're simply putting the address. 123 Main Street is the property address that we're buying the property from Mr. John Doe, right? Purchase price, whatever that total purchase price amount is. And then terms, in most cases, we're going to go ahead and just put cash because it is a cash transaction. Unless you're doing some type of creative financing where you're either assuming the mortgage subject to, seller could be financing the property to you at a certain length of time, whatever any additional terms that may have been spoken, they would be listed right here inside of the terms section. Next part, the termite inspection, really is positioned kind of like a dummy clause, right? Now, we have this in here, of course, to protect ourselves, to make sure that there is no termite infestation. But in many cases, buyers in some cases can give pushback with it, where if we absolutely had to, we could remove the termite inspection because there is other protection clauses within. Costs, basically as a negotiation piece for us, we always come in saying that we agreed to cover all closing costs related with the transaction, make it an easy and stress-free process. This helps us really to sell our value and get the seller to move forward and agree to sell to us. Now, the only thing that would be coming out of this would, of course, be prorated property taxes, right? Conveyance is simply stating that the seller agrees to provide clear title via general warranty deed with stamps affixed basically warranting the property from having any liens, judgments, or any other defects in that chain of title. Earnest money, whatever is agreed to, we usually, just to keep it low, put $500, right? If the seller does request more money, more skin in the game, we can absolutely agree to that. Risk of loss, hey, if anything was to happen to this property between the time that we contract and the time that we close, we do not own or take possession of the house in that time. Let's say that something horrible happened, the house burnt down. We don't have insurance on the property. We're not the current owner. That risk of loss would, of course, fall on the seller. As is and inspections really is the safety net inside of this contract, and we really like to lean into it. But we acknowledge, seller and buyer, this is an as-is purchase. Seller makes no warranties to the condition of the AC, anything else attached with the property. This contract is contingent upon buyer's inspection and partner's approval at buyer's sole discretion, right? This puts it as an option, giving us freedom to really come in here, inspect the property, make sure that it is a good fit for us, for any of our buyers, our partners, anyone else that the property could be assigned to or might pick it up before the time of closing, right? So that's a really, really strong clause on our behalf inside of there. Defects, seller warrants property to be free from any hazardous substances, from violation in any zoning, environmental, building, health, and or other governmental codes or ordinances, and warrants that are no material other than defects. So this is saying if there is any hazardous substances inside of the property, the seller is taking that liability, right, on their side. Now there's one thing that I'll point out that they don't really talk about in the wholesale real estate space. None of the gurus are talking about it, but that is the importance of having a lead-based paint disclosure inside of the sale of any property, right? It is inside of the government code, the regulations, and a very important thing that you make sure you deliver, having an addendum with a lead-based paint disclosure inside of that for any houses that were built before 1978, along with a pamphlet that is called How to Protect Your Family from Lead-Based Paint in Your Home. Now, technically, any house built before 1978 should include this inside of any sale of real estate, right? So that's something none of the gurus will tell you. We personally had to address an issue arising from that that ended up being a pretty serious matter. But for wholesalers, it's important to really lean in and make sure that you can make sure that you're keeping things on the up, right? Possession of the property, exclusive occupancy. This is just saying, hey, at the time of closing, keys, garage door openers, any other tools that could be used to access the premises would be delivered at the time of closing, right? Closing to take place on or around. We usually put 30 business days, giving us ample amount of time to line up the buyer, get everything together, get funds in escrow, get the property closed. Acceptance. This is really just putting a timeline for the seller saying, hey, we're giving you 24, 48 hours to accept and sign this contract, or else this offer becomes null and void. Really just is a poke to try to get that seller to move quickly and go through the process. There's no other agreements present or representations that are binding other than what's located in the contract, right? Each contingency contained shall be satisfied by the terms before the closing date. This is just saying, hey, every party is on board. We understand time is of the essence. If there's any requests from the attorneys or anyone else in the process, we agree to make sure that we're communicating and following through with anything that needs to be done. This contract is a binding agreement for the buyer, the seller, their heirs, and anyone else involved. Commissions and fees. Hey, there's no real estate agents involved in this transaction, and both buyer and seller agree that there was no assistance there within. We're signing the contract and agreeing to the terms on our own accord, right? Miscellaneous provisions, just saying, hey, a contract will constitute under the laws of whatever the state you are doing business. Pretty simple. And of course, at the bottom of every one of the pages, the seller initials, the buyer initials, and then that brings us to the bottom of the purchase and sale agreement, where we get a signature, address, telephone number, we sign it, make sure that we stamp the date that contract is executed, we send that off to the attorney, open up escrow, right? On the flip side of this, assignment of contract, that first agreement that we went over would be considered the AB contract, right? That's the AB purchase agreement. Seller to us. So the A is seller, B is us as the buyer. Assignment, if we so choose to assign our rights and position in that purchase agreement to a cash buyer for a fee, we would do what is called an assignment of contract. And an assignment of contract in its simplest form is transferring the rights of this agreement to cash buyer and buyer, where you're based as a wholesaler, you're stepping aside and allowing them to take your position in that agreement. So the assignment of contract that you can see on the screen, the assignor, which would be us, right? The assigner is the AB contract holder, the wholesaler, is making the decision to assign that agreement along with the title, interest, and anything else attached to that to the assignee or end buyer, right? To purchase the property located at 123 Main Street. Purchase contract is being assigned in the amount of, now that number that's going inside of that blank space would be the difference between AB contract price and what you're assigning it for, right? So let's say you got AB contract locked up at 100K. You got a cash buyer that's willing to pay 120 for it. Your assignment fee meeting us in the middle would be 20K to the assigner, stepping aside and allowing the buyer to take your position. Buyer shall close on or before a certain date. Upon execution of this assignment, buyer hereby agrees to pay wholesaler non-refundable earnest money deposit of whatever that earnest money is, right? It is non-refundable, which locks in that end buyer, basically stating if for any reason they were to pull out of the contract for any reason, the wholesaler, as collecting the earnest money in good faith, would keep that as a non-refundable earnest money deposit if the buyer did not perform. Buyer will be responsible for all closing costs, both seller and buyer, unless otherwise indicated. Taxes will be prorated at closing to be held at your law firm, attorney, title company, who you're comfortable with facilitating this transaction. Now again, do make sure that the law firm or the title company that you're using is comfortable facilitating an assignment of contract. Super important. And of course, signed and dated. Assigner would be AB contract holder or wholesaler with the date. Assignee is the cash buyer, date, and we have an executed assignment contract. Again, there's really no reason to overcomplicate this process, understanding the simple verbiage that lies within. Now, this video is put together for entertainment purposes. Again, do make sure that you always consult with an attorney who can review your contract and make sure that all of the legalities and the wording make sense and that you are protected as a buyer. Real estate can be risky. Again, always make sure that you do seek counsel for any real estate related or law questions. Now that's wholesale real estate contracts put together in a box, simplified for you guys to really just get a greater understanding of that process and what it looks like. I'll see you on the other side.